my fellow panellists. There's Robert Hudson, who is the Director of the National Association of Shopfitters. Mark Shortland, Director at Fagerhult. From Morrison's, Jake Kirkham. And Sarah Doyle from EAT. And we're going to talk about minimising cost, as I said. And one of the first things that strikes me is that you've got to create impact, whatever you're doing in retail, Sarah. How do you go about doing that without blowing the budget?
I'm definitely not the one to ask about that, am I? I have to say, well, I've only spent 18 months in retail, so I've come out of FMCG, so I've been on a massive learning curve coming in and actually understanding how much things cost, frankly, to make things look good and feel good from a customer experience perspective. And I spend a lot of my life, frankly, trying to get commitment within the business to spending more money rather than trying to cut things back, because I do believe if you're in the business of selling a quality product and a quality experience, it does show through, frankly, if you make too many cuts. And in fact, the journey I've been on over 18 months.
So you can't do it?
I think you can do it, but I think you have to be really clever with how you do it, frankly. And I think you do make decisions at your peril, and it can salami slice back to the point where you actually end up with a less than quality experience. And I'm the person who is the guardian of our customer experience and of our brand value. And ultimately, if you do that and you do it too much, you risk having something that looks good for 12 months and then either looks really rubbish in 5 years' time, or you have to redo again in 12 months' time. And EAT, has got a shop estate that, frankly, has been unloved, and we're about to embark on a programme of investing in that to really bring it up to date and face forward for the next 5 years. And so I've sat there saying, let's not do this for the next 12 months. Let's actually invest such that we get something that lasts a long time and doesn't cost us a load in maintenance, is somewhere that you get really excited about working, and therefore the ROI is more about how the people in our shops and in our teams feel about working there, and therefore we get lower staff turnover and all of those great things. For me, I've chucked everything in from an ROI perspective rather than just looking at the absolute payback that you get from the minute you open that store and how many sales you make from day one.
Mark, you have fancy lights, you've got LEDs, you've got other sorts. I know about the LED bit.
Yeah.
LEDs aren't that cheap still. How do you go about creating impact in a store without blowing the budget that Sarah's got?
I think it's a fascinating question from a lighting perspective, because if you look at lighting not that many years ago, and a retailer embarking on a low-cost refurbishment program, for example, then the lighting element may well have been putting new lamps in, maybe recommissioning the lighting, which is something that retailers tend to not always pick up on, is the fact that if you've got a light point at a product. But this technology shift that we're now going through with the conversion to LED, I think has put a real change, an emphasis on change within the lighting industry. So that, for example, 3-4 years ago, lighting was part of the construction of a shop. It was part of illuminating a space. I don't think we're too far away now from lighting being part of the customer experience. And there's maybe a subtle but definite difference between the two. So now we can look at lighting in terms of driving footfall, we can look at lighting in terms of...
Can you?
Well, the technology's there.
But can you?
Yeah, you can. The application
How?
of it, well, for example, lighting now with LEDs can be linked to mobile commerce. So if you walk into a store and your phone tells the retailer what you bought last week, then certainly in theory the lighting can drive you towards similar or complementary products.
Okay, so this is about minimising costs now.
Yes.
That doesn't sound very cheap to me.
No, absolutely, not very. But so I think you have to start from the beginning and look at where you can maximise your impact. So I'll give you an example. If you look at the way that we as consumers buy, we know that 65% of all purchases are made in store. And the decision to buy is made in store. And subsequently we know that To achieve that decision, we have to go through some non-conscious filters, and when we get to the conscious one, it's about our perceptual system. That determines whether we buy that product or not. Now, the perceptual system is driven by sight.
Okay, so you're going to put in some nice lights.
What I'm saying is that if you integrate good lighting with other elements, such as the colour blue, we know drives people's perception of value, then you start to increase that experience. And of course, introducing the colour blue to an existing lighting estate may not be that expensive. Whereas I think traditionally retailers would say, we're having a shop fit, let's put new lights in, or let's leave the lights we've got.
Okay. Jake, lighting the space, you come from a supermarket background, where they just chuck in a load of ambient lighting and stand back, don't they?
No, I don't think that's quite true. Certainly in...
It's partially true, isn't it?
It's certainly in key categories, I think lighting plays a very important part. So if you look at produce, the way that you light produce is absolutely crucial. If you get the lighting wrong on that, then product can look terrible. At Morrison's, there's definitely a skew towards spending more on the lighting on the counters because it's all about the fresh food.
Yeah.
So when we refurb a store, lighting will always get reviewed as part of that, but probably not as reviewed as we'd like it to be.
So how do you go about, I mean, lighting is one aspect, and we're talking about minimising cost. I'm going to keep coming back to this. How do you go about creating impact? You've got those mister units at the front of your refurbished stores with lots of fancy radicchio with water vapour pouring all over it. That looks quite expensive to me.
That is quite expensive, but it's something that is researched very well. It gives a certain dramatic feel to when people are coming into the store. Morrison's want to be first for fresh. So it's a big wow factor. So it's one of the first things that the customers see. Unfortunately, now it's getting, as we've moved through the estate and we're getting into the stores which are probably not giving the ROI that we would like to get on after the refurbishments, some of those things get cut back. But the wow factor has still got to be there when we want to be first for fresh.
Okay, Robert, do you think that at the bottom of all of this, the shop fitter bears the brunt of the pain because they're minimising cost? Okay, let's just hammer down the shop fitter and job done.
I think probably recently we've gone through a hell of a change based on the fact that, in the current economic turmoil, we're being asked to do a great deal. And I think interestingly, listening to the previous speakers, collaborative working, I think, and certainly driven by things like building information modelling, is probably the answer to deliver a more cost-effective project in going forward. I mean, when you think about, you could put a laser scanner in this room and literally it would take millions of shots, and you could take it back to the works and plug it into the machine and it would turn out the various bits and pieces that were required for a shop fitting project. I know that sounds relatively simple, but in theory that's what it does. I think if we were to embrace collectively collaborative working driven by BIM, then I think there's certainly a very good opportunity to deliver what the client is looking for in a more cost-effective project.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's important to take suppliers along the journey. So when we started with the Fresh Format project, it was very much a working team that went away worked in solus, really. We locked ourselves away from the rest of the business, and we weren't to be influenced by anyone else. We had to deliver what we thought was right. And in hindsight, because of the fast turnaround times we had to then roll out, faster than we were initially led to believe, it would have been nice to have taken some of the suppliers along the journey sooner, and I think that would have helped get a faster and a cheaper solution in the long run.
Sarah, just picking up on what we've just been talking about, how much pressure is brought to you by your MD or your CEO when it comes to costs? I mean, they obviously keep a watchful eye, but when it comes to refurbishing your EAT stores, and you say that there's a major program about to be undertaken or is ongoing or whatever, do they say do what you need to do, or do they say do what you need to do but don't make it expensive? Do they set the parameters, or do you go to them?
It's about payback. So ultimately, we have a business case that we establish on every single shop and we base it on the fact that we've refurbished 5 of our shops already. We roughly know what return we're getting. We've done a variety of different things in those shops, so we have tested being cheaper and being more and putting more investment in, and we've learnt from that, frankly, that you get a better ROI by spending the money, and thus it makes my job a damn sight easier, frankly, in having that conversation when you can go with an established business case rather than pie in the sky.
Absolutely.
And I just want to spend the money. And that's basically how we've done it. So on every shop as we move through, we present the business case, we cost every shop individually based on the ideal scenario, and frankly I can justify that my ideal scenario pays back because we've done it 5 times already, and it will continue to iterate, I'm sure, as we do at every shop, because every shop has individual requirements and we'll learn each time.
So if it's about ROI, Mark, and given that you've got a lot of competitors out there in the marketplace, how do you go about demonstrating value? Because that's the key to minimising cost, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, there is an element of a race to the bottom, undoubtedly.
Dutch auction, totally, yeah.
Absolutely, and funnily enough, with the technology shift to LED, I suppose 2 or 3 years ago we would have said that would have taken some time to come about, but actually it's already started, where it's about bottom line price. For us, the differentiator is in being part of the process, in being able to say to our clients that we can provide you with a service that gives you the best return on your investment, whether that be a brand new conceptual flagship like And Other Stories, which Fagerhult lit, or whether it's other stores where perhaps you've got a very small budget and you're just looking to make some minor amendments. But I think that really is the difference, and that's where we're seeing almost a seismic shift in lighting, where historically you would have a warehouse full of stock that you would sell that product for 10 years. Actually, you can't do that anymore. It has to move quicker and faster, and it's that service that enables us to do bespoke things, to do things that deliver that return, whether it be small or large, that is the real differentiator. I think that's proven to be a massive challenge in our industry.
How often do retailers come to you and just say you're too expensive?
Almost daily, I would suggest, but it doesn't mean it's true. And
Well done, we're working with you, and I know my budget.
yes, Sarah gets wonderful value, I would like to suggest.
Of course she does, yeah.
I see your jet lag hasn't lost your ability to throw in the controversial one-liner.
No. Yeah, well, Robert, bearing in mind all of that, and that jet lag notwithstanding, I wonder, based upon what the other three have all just said, I come back to it. Surely, at the end of it all, the shop fitter is the one who's just going to sort of be a bit like this, ducking for cover, as Sarah and Jake and Mark come along and say, well, we've got all of this stuff, just put it in, just get it done.
Well, I
and
think
do it for a cheap price, by the way.
As I said earlier, I think we're having to make significant changes on how we deliver the end product. We've got to move with the times. We've got to recognise what is going on in the marketplace. And obviously from an NAS perspective, we're going out of our way at the moment to help shop fitters deliver, hopefully, a more cost-effective end product to the client. And I think, as I said, building information modelling, which hasn't really sort of had a great delivery this morning, is one way that we can do that, because we're adapting. You know, regrettably, a number of shop fitters have gone by the wayside since 2008 because they simply haven't had the ability to make the change. But our point of view from the NAS is working with clients, working with shop fitters, and helping them make those changes so that they can deliver a more cost-effective end product. And if that uses IT, like laser scanners and 3D modelling or whatever, then so be it.
Okay, I mean, the title of this session is called The Options, Maximum Impact, Minimum Cost in Retail Store Design. How often, Sarah, do you make exceptions when it comes to cost and just say, sod it, or do it?
Yeah, fairly frequently,
yeah?
To be honest. I think you have to. I mean, you have to take risks, don't you? When we did the Strand, which was the first time we'd done this concept,
I remember the store, yeah.
Yeah, we put digital menu boards in. there is no work you can do to prove or disprove whether that's going to work. And really, you're building the store as you're making the decisions, so you're not going to put them up somewhere else and test them and see what happens. And as I sit here today, I still can't do an ROI business case on those. But because, frankly, there's all sorts of stuff involved, dynamic menus and the benefit we get from being able to be more dynamic, and you can't business case it. So digital menu boards I completely took with the support of the chief exec as an independent decision on the hoof and unfounded.
Just take a risk, let's get it done.
Yeah, and frankly, that's the business we're in, isn't it? Because customers don't expect you to sit around and write long pieces of paper justifying things. When you're in a dynamic world like we are, and the food market is massively dynamic, our menu changes 3 times a day, every week, then you've got to be pacey. And I think the really enjoyable bit of my job, frankly, is taking risks and allowing for those, and then looking back at the budget as to how you're going to pay for them, but kind of doing it, making sure that it's an intelligent and informed risk, I suppose.
So informed risk, Jake. How much information do you require before you take a risk, or is it just sort of hunch?
Certainly when we started with the Fresh Format project, a lot of it was a risk, a lot of it was a hunch, a lot of it was taking advice and taking great ideas that we've seen elsewhere that they're generally working, so we adapted to make suit to Morrison's. Some worked, some didn't, but yeah, absolutely, I agree. You've got to take the risks. If we'd sat and been safe about what we'd done, we wouldn't have got to where we got to.
Well, but do you think shop fitters have taken enough risks?
I think we take risks on a daily basis. That
How?
Well, value engineering. If a client comes to a shop fitter with something, and I think as John from ISG said, it's better to be honest and say, well, hang on a minute, I don't really think we can do that, but what we can do is value engineer something and deliver it back to the client and say, does that fit into what you're trying to achieve? And I think it is about honesty, because I think certainly in my experience of shop fitting, client shop fitter relationships are in the main nurtured, and unless there's been a serious throwing of the toys, then they tend to stick with the devil they know rather than the devil they don't know.
Okay, well, I mean, a good idea generally in store design terms, I guess, probably outstrips at any given time substantial investment. How closely do you work with retailers in terms of suggesting what they might do, or do you wait for them to come to you with a lighting proposition?
Certainly our best work is achieved when we work as closely as possible, and when we talk about investment and the return on that sum, it can come about in a manner of different ways, and we I hope Sarah doesn't mind me mentioning it, but we've done some terrific work with Pret a Manger, where they've looked at using their estate in a cleverer way, in ensuring that the scenes can be changed, the ambience can be changed to accommodate the demographic of consumer and the changing menu and time of day. And so it's perhaps in instances like that where we can say you can really do your best work when you work collaboratively. And I think that supports what Robert was saying, and also some of the earlier speakers, that actually when you get into that level of collaboration, you can get both great results but also that reduction of investment, because if you work closely with the retailer that says, we haven't got much money to spend, but we understand that 80% of our buying decisions are made in the fitting room, well then that's the place to invest the money. Whereas if you start with a much broader brush, you'll probably get, frankly, a more diluted result off the back of that.
So you do work, do you actually go to retailers with propositions, or do they come to you? How does it work?
Absolutely both. So we'll often go to a retailer, usually in having assessed what they currently do, and try to make solutions that maybe enhance both the consumer experience, but also it might be a case of actually, you can reduce energy, or you can reduce your maintenance burden, or whatever it may be. But we also are very respectful, because we understand that even though we've got an idea, it doesn't mean we know everything about their business, and it certainly doesn't mean that everything they've done in the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years prior to that is wrong. So I think, again, I'm sorry to keep using the word, but it's very much about a collaborative experience, about saying we've got some ideas, you've obviously got great ideas and an in-depth knowledge about your business and your consumer and your offer, and if we can put those together, we're probably going to come up with something that's really good.
Okay. Jake, an easy win. Give me an easy win for minimising cost. Is there one?
I don't know if it's an easy win, but it's fairly free. That's spend more time planning, spend more time up front.
How does that work?
Well, I think a lot of decisions are made quickly and sometimes irrationally. Yes, sometimes they are about taking risks, but I think...
Doesn't that vary depending on the sector? Because I mean, if you're in the supermarket business, that's a multi-billion pound business. By definition, we all have to eat, so we all go through supermarkets or whatever. If you're in a fashion shop or whatever, somewhat different kettle of fish, I would guess.
Yes, I can't speak for fashion, but certainly in my experience, more time was always going to be beneficial to the longer term result. Spending more time planning and getting the details right, rather than having something which looks great and gives you the ROI, gives you what everyone thinks, and then everyone getting very excited and wanting to roll it out tomorrow, rather than pausing just for a little while and just making sure you've got all your ducks in the row before you push the button and go.
Okay.
So we could have saved a lot more money just with a little more time up front, to spend more time getting the right item in the right place, or value engineering everything properly.
Right. Sarah, what would you do?
Well, I agree actually with Jake that get less things wrong. Most of the money we spend, frankly, is in putting things right. And when you're doing 5 individual stores, you're going to get a lot of things wrong, frankly, and that is where we've sunk a lot of money that we wouldn't then re-spend.
How many stores have you got?
115.
115, and you've done 5 as pilots.
Yeah, yeah. And the purpose there is to learn, to plan. We've spent a whole quarter basically planning the next rollout, and we only started it last weekend. So we took 3 months out basically and said, let's learn from all of this. And I think that is the investment that will then make everything else more efficient and mean that we can deliver the desirable shop fit for the budget and give us a stronger ROI. The other thing I would say is staff recruitment and training. And I know it's not a shop fitting solution, but the customer experience for me is transformed by having an energized, excited, informed, inspired and inspiring workforce who are the face of the brand, frankly. And that's where we've spent a lot of time and energy as well. Uniforms, stuff like that. The stuff, frankly, when I came into this job, I'd never had to do before in terms of managing the whole experience, everything people touch and feel and smell. It's those things that make a massive difference and don't necessarily cost a load of money to deliver.
Yeah, small details can make a massive amount of difference. You know, if you're trying to open or refurb a store and you've got a wonderful facade and you know you've put all your steamers over your vegetables and you corrected your lighting, you put over the new signage, but then you've still got sticky marks on the floor or broken flags in ambience.
That's terrible.
It goes against the brand. I mean, how can you expect customers to go, wow, look at this, isn't it fantastic, if then you don't get some of the basic housekeeping right in the other parts of the store? Everything that you've done goes down the drain.
Any Clinton cards in the audience? No? They're famous for putting bits of sticking plaster, along with a well-known stationer, bits of sticking plaster across the carpet to join them up because they can't be bothered spending the money. That's not a minimising of cost, that's a deletion of the quality of the customer experience. I would suggest exactly what you're saying. Robert, what would you do to minimise cost, something quick and dirty?
Well, I've seen a significant sea change since coming to Shop 50 about 15 years ago, where the client used to sort of blow the whistle and a load of hairy shop fitters used to dive over the top of the trenches and bang, 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 and it was done. To, as I said, a more collaborative approach now where, you know, the mutual benefits of working with the clients in how we actually deliver what it is that you guys are looking for. And I think that's far better. And I think certainly building information modelling, as it develops within the industry, I think will certainly help to further improve that.
Okay. Mark?
For me, it would be to understand deeply where consumer behaviour matters with respect to buying patterns, and use your money wisely to enhance those areas with respect to lighting.
Okay. I'm conscious that you all like lunch, so I'm going to get us out of here in time for lunch. So we've got, lady, gentlemen, we have 7 minutes. And in that time, I'd like you to ponder the following. If, Sarah, you were starting afresh with a new chain of shops, it's not something that would be afforded to any of us normally, but if you were, what would you do to ensure that you didn't spend too much money and that you got a result that you wanted?
I'd hire a bloody good project manager.
Bloody good project manager. You
Yeah.
wouldn't hire a design consultancy?
Well, you know, if it was the one thing that was going to make the difference,
Yep.
yeah, I'd hire a bloody good project manager. Because
What difference would that make?
Because I think that is ultimately what drives a good result at the end of the day, coordinating all the efforts of everyone involved, and making sure that you're delivering a consistent execution every time, and that everyone feels involved and committed and is driving towards the same end game. For me, it's a principle of any business, whether you're designing and fitting a shop or kind of running a marketing program. Actually, it's the project management that ultimately makes the difference.
Okay. Jake?
I can't disagree with the project manager. I think having people who can keep you on track is absolutely crucial. I probably would say a design consultant, but I would say a design consultant that is probably a little more full service. So actually they really understand the brand as well. So they understand what you're trying to achieve, not just in the retail estate, but as a business in the whole. So rather than just focusing on the bricks and the mortar,
Yeah.
I think it's understanding what the business is about and how you translate whatever the brand statement is, or whatever the brand experience should be, and then delivering that into into retail efficiently as possible.
How easy is it to find one of those?
There's a few out there, I'm sure.
Okay. Mark?
Yeah, in many ways I'd agree. I think I'd look to employ a great brand agency. Obviously we've got some in the room here today, but certainly what David was talking about earlier, one that understands the full customer journey and the full brand experience rather than just how to design a shop. And then more locally, I would, depending on the complexity of it, I'd consider a retail lighting design practice such as the likes of LAPD or somebody like that, who can offer a specific expertise in terms of building a concept, if that makes sense.
Robert?
Well, obviously a project manager from a shop fitting point of view who's prepared to work with the client. You know, I think we must turn our back on perhaps the traditional confrontational approach between client and shop fitter, and actually work with the client in delivering the client's dream. I mean, we've just got a new Morrison's where I live, and you know, I have to say it looks bloody good. But I think the shop fitting project manager working with the client in delivering that dream, so that, as you say, when the customers walk in the shop, it's got that wow factor.
I'm just curious, if you we were hearing earlier fewer but better from David, and that's good, except that there, particularly in legacy chains, and there are lots of legacy chains out there, that means there's a lot but that aren't very good, because it costs money to do this sort of thing. How do you go about primping and poncing a legacy store or a chain to make a difference, Sarah? And you've got 115 stores. That's quite a lot, given that there are 20 major locations, according to Jess. How do you go about getting all 115 up to scratch? Because you've got 5 at the moment. You've just started a rollout. It's going to take a while, isn't it?
Yeah, it's about having a good architect who can do a scheme that fits to the concept, but also then is tailored to every individual location. And yeah, I mean, great project management, if I were to come back to it, to be honest. You know, it is about just keeping on top of the programme and frankly, you know, trying to change as little of that concept as possible as you roll through the estate. But you know, your opportunity to transform when you are in legacy store world is massive. And so doing it as quickly as possible, frankly, is the mantra we're working to, because we know that the results that you then deliver are worth having.
How realistic is it to do things very quickly, Jake?
Morrisons do things very quickly. So it is realistic, but I wouldn't say that you get perfection when you do it quickly. There's
a compromise somewhere, isn't there?
There absolutely has to be a compromise. So the first 100 Store the Futures were rolled out within 3, 6, 8 months or so, done very, very quickly. The next 100 probably had to slow down a little bit because ROI changes, and you know, as it filters through the estate, things don't quite work as well, so you have to tinker a little bit more. But I think having suppliers that you've worked with on it for a long time and understand your estate, I think is quite crucial in order to get stuff moving quickly. So if we'd wanted to start with new suppliers, whether it be architects or shop fitters or any of those guys, I think that would have slowed you down even more so and made more mistakes along the way. So having a happy band of suppliers is critical to getting it as close as you can to right first time.
Mark, do you think the price of lighting is going to come down to a point where everybody can do LED?
Yeah, absolutely. And the process has already started. I think it's estimated that 60% of all lighting will be LED by 2016. And
in stores?
This is across the lighting, the whole category of lighting. So that's commercial build, retail, the whole lot. And when you consider that retailers are traditionally early adopters, then clearly that will drive the volumes with respect to the retail sector. We know here in the UK that actually, again, UK retailers are perhaps earlier adopters than certainly European counterparts, and LED already represents 60 to 70% of new or refurbishment store lighting. And that is in stark contrast to places like Scandinavia, where they've been quite slow to pick up on it, but are just starting now to go through that process. So yeah, I think 3 to 4 years. Frankly, I don't think you'll see many retailers not using LED.
Okay. Robert, anywhere you can see in shop fitting that they can bring the prices down? Or is it rock bottom as it is?
We talk about price, and yes, we would obviously, we have to make a reasonable return on our investment. But I think Jake makes a very valid point that yes, we do work quickly, because if shop fitters are in Jake's stores, the tills aren't ringing. But I think every so often, and again, Tony Jacob made the point earlier on, that how you nurture that relationship between client and shop fitter, and pausing for breath, which I think is what you were implying, are we doing this how we want to do it, or are there further improvements that we can make? And I think the term partnership has sort of now gone out the window a bit and is being replaced by this collaborative working approach, and I think that's the way forward. And I think if we can adopt that in its proper fashion, then yes, I think there's a way forward.
Okay, collaboration. It seems that there is room for movement on price. There's certainly room for movement towards lunch. Robert, Mark, Jake, Sarah, thank you very much. I would ask you to be back here promptly, and meanwhile I'd ask you to please applaud our panellists.